Hi there, welcome to the Grapplehook Podcast. My name's Matt and I'm joined by Dan. How's it going, Dan?
Very well. And how are you doing?
Yes, I'm good, thanks. I am good. We're approaching the weekend. We've got a deluge of gaming news to run through, which will be good to share with everyone and see what everyone's thoughts and opinions are, including your own.
A deluge, he says.
Deluge. Well, we finally hit that point now where all the game in Microsoft and PlayStation have said nothing in a Mexican standoff. And then all of a sudden, we just have tons of information and news all within a week of each other, which has been quite nice. So we now know what we're getting, when they come out, and what the prices are, which is great to hear.
Indeed. Yeah, it's been a weird one. Been a weird one. Like like we're sort of saying, briefly before we start recording it. I wonder if this standoff is a product of the year. Being the pandemic and everything that's happened around the world, or and consequently the cancellation of the events, E3 and various things that, various conferences that haven't taken place, or would this standoff have happened regardless? Obviously we'll never know, but
Yeah.
it certainly seems odd to be this late in the year and this close to the release of the consoles, and only now, within the last week, have we actually got, prices, dates, various details about the the pre-orders and backwards compatibility, and it's just crazy.
Mm. Yeah, and part of me thinks that, a big factor of it is definitely going to have been COVID and the cancellation of the live events. Because ultimately, if you've got a live event, you have to schedule in the time that you've got. And typically, Xbox always goes first and Sony goes after. However, after Xbox was burnt so badly, last announcement where they announced their price and then Sony snuck in and released a PS4 at a loss to try and compete and make a really competitive price. I would have even thought that even with the E3 events, so Xbox would have announced maybe the date, but then they would have held back on the price. Sony then have to follow straight after and see what happens there. I think it was a product of its time in terms of what, the time that we're in at the moment, but also from the lessons learned from the previous E3, where Microsoft have sold more Xbox Ones than they sold 360s, but they've had that negative press and that lull where they've had to catch up, and they haven't had the same success that PS4 has had, which obviously they would have wanted. So they would have been playing catch up since day one. So who knows though? We will never know. All that we know is we are 10 weeks, less than 10 weeks from the Xbox launch, and we only just found out the Xbox price and the release date, and the same for the PS5 as well. So,
Well, I mean, I'd also say with the Xbox in particular, the big change, I think in the last sort of 6 years, was Phil Spencer taking over from, was it Jason Holtman? Was that the original head of Microsoft's Xbox division? And then Phil Spencer came in. I think Phil Spencer's really done a sort of quite a lot of work, hasn't he, in sort of sort of restoring the Xbox brand and making it more competitive with PlayStation. I think it was a bit sort of too little, too late.
yeah.
With the PlayStation, like you say, they've sort of made a lot of ground initially, but I think going into this next generation, I would say if Xbox aren't in a better position, in terms of strength, like what they've got going into this next gen, I'd say they're equal
Yeah.
to PlayStation. I'd say with PlayStation, for me at least, it's their existing library of first-party games that will have sequels, some of which were confirmed in the PlayStation conference, and the fact that it's the winner of the previous generation. It's sort of it's taken
Yeah.
that momentum and not really lost any. So
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, when you look back on the Xbox and the PlayStation, Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, both of those consoles sold better than their, in that period than their predecessors. So both of them in terms of number of gross sales are both winners. but ultimately Xbox will always be seen as the loser by comparison to PlayStation, which they did. They didn't sell as many, but they still sold more Xbox Ones than they did Xbox 360s, which is actually, thinking about it, quite a significant achievement considering how many Xbox 360s were out there. I don't know many people who didn't have a 360 at the
Yeah,
time, particularly the peak when Xbox Live was kicking off. So I think the fact they've been able to do that has been positive. And you're absolutely right, Phil Spencer. They've changed their tactic and their approach, because that reveal of the Xbox One with Dom Matrick, is it, where he came on with his, talking about television and being overly formal, and then PlayStation kind of been a bit informal, a bit player-like. I actually
yeah,
think it's kind of done a complete 180, and now Microsoft are the ones that are giving PlayStation a pat on the back when they've got a reveal, when they're talking about their consoles or their games. They've got their developers actively, first-party developers for Xbox kind of saying that they're enjoying their competition's games and things like that. It's given the impression that they're really, friendly. Obviously, they're competitive, and competition is great for the consumer ultimately.
yeah.
But it's different attitude, and Phil Spencer's kind of driven that. Phil Spencer's obviously focused a lot more on creating a more competitive product with the Xbox, a competitive ecosystem, and they now have got their first party talent. They've created those studios to try and create first party games. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next gen, and see what the lessons we'll learn from this, from the Xbox One
Yeah, but
going
but
forward.
I would say that the sort of selling more Xbox Ones than 360s, I would say that's probably viewed more as sort of like a silver medal. I think if you were to if you were to ask Phil Spencer,
Yeah, of
would you rather
course.
sell more Xbox Ones than 360s or more Xbox Ones than PlayStation 4s? Yeah,
Yeah, well, of
I think we
course.
know what the
And
gold
the
medal
thing,
is.
well, that's clear, because Xbox have never officially announced. They did at first, the amount of units they sold, but then they've kind of hidden that information away from their financials. But other third part, we only know the sales numbers from third parties like EA mentioning how many they're aware of, and us kind of being able to work out the maths backwardsly, because PlayStation, because they're doing really well with the PlayStation 4, announcing how many units they sold. But by comparison, so did PlayStation, did the same as well. When PlayStation Vita came out and it was selling less than expected, they announced the figures for a while, and then they started mixing them with the PSP figures, and then they just stopped announcing them altogether.
Yeah,
So you look at that, and one of the things I've always respected about Nintendo is, regardless of whether the consoles sell well or not, they've always just been frank with how many that they're selling. They're out there talking about how well the Switch has been selling, which is great, but also they actually were honest about how poorly the Wii U is doing as well. So I don't know why they have to hide the figures, because people kind of know anyways. But
I think it's a little
yeah, I've
bit
always
different
always had
for
respect for Nintendo
Nintendo.
for doing
I
that.
think it's a little bit different for Nintendo because they're not directly competing with Xbox or PlayStation, are they? I think they're kind of sort of within their sort of own sort of atmosphere.
I think that was the case for now, but obviously when they had the Wii U that came out, the Wii U was Nintendo's direct follow-up to the Wii, which is the best-selling games console of all time. And they were open, honest, and basically showing how poorly it was doing. And it was a competitor against Xbox 360 and the PS3. Obviously, when the next gens came out, it
Sure.
didn't become it wasn't a competitor. The Switch is a completely different console altogether, kind of doing its own thing with its own niche. Um, but we'll see what happens. We'll see when these consoles come out, who drops their sales figures first and doesn't announce them. Because I'd be very surprised that the person who is going to be losing the next gen is going to be the person shouting from the rooftops how many consoles they haven't sold compared to their competitor.
Well, time will
Won't be
tell.
long now though. We'll find all this information out soon. So this is the Grapplehook Podcast. We record on a Wednesday every week and we release on a Friday. You can contact the show by contacting me or Dan through Twitter. You can contact me at Matroidvania, and you can also contact Dan at TatchND. That's TATCHND through Twitter. We'd love to hear from you, your thoughts, your ideas, your comments, or any criticisms as well about the show. We're happy to hear them all. Try and make this the best gaming podcast on the internet.
Unleash them on us.
So Dan, yeah, let us know. Open the floodgates now. That's it. Dan, what games have you been playing this week?
Been doing a bit more Fall Guys. Yeah, sort of jumped back into it. Well, I sort of worked out that I had about there's about 20 days left of the season pass, or like the in-game battle pass, before the next season, and the next kind of, it's free, you don't have to buy it, and there's like 40 levels, and I was about sort of 16, I don't know, but ranked 24 out of 40, so I had about 16 to go, and I was thinking, well, I've got about 20 days to get about 15 levels, so I'm sort of working on the basis that get about a level a day on Fall Guys, which doesn't take very long, 4 or 5 games, so that I'm sort of up to date when the next season drops. But yeah, bit of Fall Guys. I've been sort of enjoying that. Got another win. Got 2 to my name now.
2 crowns.
2 crowns, yeah. So it's harder now, obviously, and they've mixed it up. They've added like a new variation sort of mode to the to the game, so there's more variety to the levels. It's not sort of, I think a lot of people will get to the point where the sort of the strategies had been worked out, and it was quite, for people that played it quite a lot, it was quite easy to progress through the stages, and they sort of had all the sort of tactics and little tricks to qualify. And now that they've kind of they've added this sort of variation, you don't quite know which level or which version of the level you're going to get. So it's good. I think it's kind of even the scales a little bit for at least a little while. And the big, I don't know how much you've kept up to date with it, but the big news with Fall Guys going into into the launch of the game and over the last sort of month or so was the sort of problem with cheaters. Yeah, believe it or not.
Yeah, I saw some of those images of super fast people flying through the level at top speed.
People cheating on Fall Guys of all games. Like, do people have no limits to the scumminess? But yeah,
it's just, what do you achieve from that? I don't understand.
Yeah. But
there's always going to be cheaters in all types of games.
Yeah, I won't go into sort of too much detail, but there was sort of quite an interesting sort of string of tweets on the Fall Guys Twitter account, and the guy that runs the Fall Guys is absolutely amazing. He's done such a good job, sort of keeping the community informed and stuff, and he sort of went through step by step what they were doing to counter the cheaters, and how they had to be quite vague in what updates they were giving, because the more updates they gave, the more information they were giving the cheaters, and the cheaters are finding ways to get around their sort of cheat system.
Yeah.
I won't go into too much detail here because I'd waffle on for a long time about this, but one of the interesting things that they did, for a short while at least, once they were confident that they were identifying cheaters correctly and that there weren't any false flags, they then opened up what they called Cheaters Island, and it essentially meant that all of the cheaters that were confirmed cheaters got put into a playlist together, so that they would only be competing against other people cheating, and then it was just a case of who's got the best hacks.
Yeah, which is a good idea, because I know Call of Duty Modern Warfare Warzone did that. So they made sure that basically, if you're going to cheat, you can go ahead and play with the cheaters, which is rightly so. I think they're going for a competitive edge, so they can just lose that competitive edge by playing with the same people.
Well, they ended up disabling
the same kind of hacks.
They ended up disabling it because the sort of the counter productive side, I don't know if that's the right way of putting it, but the sort of flip side of that is that people were then making clips of Cheater Island. These clips were then going viral on Twitter or YouTube or whatever, and it was giving people the wrong impression of the game. People that haven't played the game are looking at it and thinking, like, is that the game? That looks horrible. We're not playing that. So they ended up turning off Cheater Island, because it's like, we just can't, we don't want people to think that is what the game is. Obviously, that was kind of the
Catch
it
22.
was, it was sort of the unexpected consequence of punishing the cheaters. But the interesting thing is that the cheaters island was like a regular lobby, so it required 40 people to be sort of matched into it at the same time. So the
Right.
actual likelihood of Cheaters Island activating was so remote because it would require 40 people at once going into it.
Or
So
cheating, or being identified as
yeah,
well.
so what would happen? They would just basically be, for anyone that's played Fall Guys, they'll know that when you're waiting to go into a game on the main menu, your little bean is just falling. It's just falling until they find enough players, and then the game starts. The cheaters were put into this sort of situation where they wouldn't find any games, and their beans were just free falling continuously, and they wouldn't be able to play any games at all. And the funny thing about that is that the community manager was saying, that they would basically they were getting tweets from people saying like the game's broken, my character's just free falling on the menu, and they knew that yes, that's right, but that's because you're cheating. They can't say that, because then these people can figure out, oh, like, I'm not able to play the game because I've been flagged as a cheater, and then they can start working ways around it, which they did. But the long story short is that they released their most recent update, I think it was a couple of days ago, and it was called Big Yeetus Anti-Cheatus. And the Big Yeetus side of that is in some of the stages they've added a massive hammer, which, depending on where it's positioned and how you use it, it can sort of quite literally yeet you, or for people that are not familiar with that term, basically launch you forwards. And that can help you, sort of catch up if
Right.
you're falling behind or whatever. And then the anti-cheaters side of that is that they've actually implemented Epic's anti-cheat software within the game, hoping that that's going to sort of put an end to all of the problems they've been having. So it'd be interesting to see how that works.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. It kind of reminds me of the strategies that some game developers and creators use to tackle things like pirated games. How they kind of put sneaky ways in where the person who's playing the pirated copy of the game doesn't know that the game knows it's pirated, and will do things to make it more difficult. I think my favorite example of this was in Spyro Year of the Dragon, so Spyro 3.
Yeah,
It knew you were playing a pirated game, and very early on in the game, it warned you, you're playing a pirated version of the game. We recommend that you buy a full version of the game, proper version
yeah,
of the game. If you ignored that, though, you could play the rest of the game. You could play the full game. But as the game progressed, the game became more buggy. So things wouldn't happen, like doors wouldn't open that should have opened.
brilliant.
The levels would kick you out. There'd be points where you'd go and get an egg, which is one of the objectives in the game, and it would sit there forever opening. It would never actually open. And then the real kicker, and I saw some guy on YouTube who actually played through this version of the game and got through all the way through with all the crashes, all the bugs, made it through to the final boss. And just as the final boss is about to happen, the game literally restarts. All your save data is reset, and you start at the beginning of the game again. It's absolutely
Brilliant.
fantastic to watch.
Yeah.
So it kind of just, I think it's, it's good that they've come out and announced it. I always really do find it interesting to hear what developers do behind the scenes, particularly to unknowing cheaters or unknowing, people who unknowingly pirate the game, and the game knows what's going on and kind of almost creates a separate version of that game and provide a different experience to that person because you've cheated or because you've bought a pirated version of the game. Always fascinates me, that. So, Brilliant. So you've been playing Fall Guys then?
Yeah, Fall Guys. Like I said last week, I've started a Skyrim playthrough, and I'm cracking on with that. I'm sort of working through the Thieves Guild quest line, which is interesting. I'm sort of pretty much at the end of that. Move on to something else within Skyrim. Keep that going.
Nice.
And briefly, I don't even know if it's worth mentioning, but briefly jumped into a bit of GTA 5 online last night. I just felt in the mood to do a bit of griefing for some reason. Just, go online for no particular reason. I've got one or two friends that have played it a lot, and they've got all like the big toys, all the big guns. So I sort of thought, like, it'd be cool to jump into the online GTA world and just ruin some evenings. Did- it made me feel better. We ended up getting put into a lobby full of Russians, and they're typing in the text chat of the game, so literally couldn't understand anything they were saying, and they were having some sort of meetup with their fancy, racing cars or whatever. And me and one of my friends roll up in the Insurgent, which is like a big armored truck with a 50 cal Rambo machine gun on top, and we just absolutely annihilated them. And after that, it was just relentless pursuit, like forever. They just would not quit. And we just had this epic fight with them for probably about an hour or two. It was awesome. Yeah, it was really good. So it's fair game. It was, I say, griefing. Like we found sort of happy participants, shall we say? But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it was good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not getting into GTA Online or anything. I'm like level 30.
No, you're
It's
just having a little mess around.
yeah, just a sandbox, a bit of sandbox chaos, So yeah, it's about me.
I don't think it's a saying, but I've always understood or always had this thought in my high mind, which is don't piss off the Russians.
Oh, we did,
That's
big
always sat with
time,
me.
and we definitely killed them more than they killed us as well. I mean, I don't know how much you play GT Online, but there's the Insurgent, which is like an armored truck, and we're driving around in that, and that was funny.
Yeah.
And then there's a flying craft called an Avenger, which basically has sort of two passenger seats, and it's like sort of explosive minigun rounds or whatever on the top and the bottom of it.
Right.
It just absolutely decimates everything. And we had guys in fighter jets coming after us, in stealth helicopters on the ground with explosive sniper rifles and all the toys they could pull out, and they didn't get us. They couldn't get us. It was glorious.
No.
Yeah, I mean they got us once or twice when we were on the ground, but yeah, other than that, it was good. It was a good fight, good fun.
Right on. That's good.
And yourself, what have you been cracking on with?
So I've been playing three games this week. I'll start off with a game that I've played the least because I couldn't stand it, and that's the Elder Scrolls Online.
Oh,
I decided to give it a go on Game Pass because it was on the Xbox. I booted it up, started playing it, and I got quite early on in the game. I got to like I think level 5 or 6 or 7 or something like that. But I could not see past the animations of the guy running and just how you almost kind of you're playing it in first person mode, and your mind tricks you thinking that you're playing Skyrim, and then you go through a dungeon and you kill all these enemies, and then you do the objective, and you have to run back out through the dungeon, and all the enemies have respawned again, and then you see other players. And I know it's an MMO, but it for me it just doesn't feel as engaging as playing something like Skyrim, and I could not stand the animations and the fact it does what free-to-play games do,
hmm.
which is constantly remind you there is stuff to buy using real in-game money, and it really puts me off. Like open up the menus and it's like you can buy this with crowns, this, and it's like if I wanted all this stuff, which I don't, I would have I would have played a free-to-play game, which I wouldn't. So it really put me off and kind of soured me from the experience. And I've played other MMOs, which I think do the job a lot better when it comes to balancing that type of thing.
Yeah.
So I played that, wasn't really much of a fan of it. So, which is a shame because I really do like the Elder Scrolls games, but I know it is different. I then decided to jump back in and play a bit of Children of Mortar, which is a game I've been going in and out of over the past, I want to say 6 months. And I absolutely love the game. It's like it's a roguelike. So it's very much the idea that you come into the level of the game, you die, but then you keep your currency or your level upgrades and you level up abilities back in the base, and you slowly make progression that way. It kind of reminds me of the gameplay hook of Rogue Legacy, which is probably one of my favorite roguelikes of all time. But the difference with this compared to something like Rogue Legacy is that it's not a Metroidvania, and it also has a story which is quite a good story, and it's told in the same way that Bastion tells a story. So you had the narrator and Bastion who used to talk over the gameplay and the story aspects, and this does the same thing as well. So it's really, really good, really, really addictive. The artwork's great, the soundtrack is really nice, the progression is good, it's got some RPG elements to it, and it's tough, it's hard as nails. The idea of it is that you are going to die a lot, but you are going to continually progress because you pick up money, you gain experience, so you'll die, respawn, die, respawn, and constantly level up as you go along.
Yeah.
So it's a game that I've been going back to bit by bit. It's just nice to be able to open it up and play for half an hour and then put it back down.
I can't say I've heard of
You know
it.
that your progress has been saved.
Mm.
Yeah, it's really good. Really, really good game. I highly recommend it if you're a fan of roguelikes or and that. The game that I've played the most though, which I'm absolutely enamored with, is Spiritfarer. So Spiritfarer
I've heard of this, yeah.
is a game where it's a 2D game where beautiful art style, beautiful soundtrack, and the idea is that you pick up souls on this boat and you fulfill their wishes before you travel them through to the afterlife. And it's such a lovely game. I'm very early on in it at the moment, and there's part of the game is about managing your town, not a town, but the boat. So if you've got residents, you need to make sure that you're growing enough food, you're making money, you're uh, supporting the people on the boat, making sure that you're looking after them, making sure that they remain in happy spirits. And as you go along, you're upgrading the boat, you're buying new things, you're gathering resources. But it's just as a beautiful looking game. If anyone listening, if you've not seen what this game looks like, just have a look at some of the videos online. It literally looks like a cartoon that you'd watch on TV that's just played along. Not as far gone as like Cuphead, which looks like a 1920s 30s cartoon, but it's just really good, and I've found myself playing it for hours at a time without even realizing that it's been hours at a time. So highly recommend that game.
Oh wow,
Really
yeah, no,
recommend that.
you're selling it to me. It's and it's Thunder Lotus, isn't it? Thunder Lotus Games that made it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, they're the guys that I think they're the publisher. I believe they might be the creator. I'm not sure, but yeah, really, really good. Well worth it. It's one of those games where it's just nice to kick back and relax and chill out. If you've played things like Stardew Valley or Animal Crossing in the past, it's kind of similar to that, but the characters and the are much more engaging than both of those games, I would say, and there's a bit more to it. So
I'm just reading
highly
the
recommend that.
reading
I'm
the
probably going to be going back to it after
reading the
this.
description on Steam, and for anyone listening, I think this is probably a sort of a nice way of explaining it to add to what you're saying there, Matt. So Spiritfarer is a cozy management game about dying. As ferry master to the deceased, build a boat to explore the world, care for your spirit friends, and guide them across mystical seas to finally release them into the afterlife. What will you leave behind? That's like quite a powerful game description. It's like, holy hell. Like,
Yeah,
it's like, wow.
when you look at just off that initially that description, you're thinking, what? It's about a game about dying. Oh my god, it's it sounds really depressing, but it's not. It's really really nice, really heartwarming as you play it, and the reviews are really positive. I mean, looking at
It's
Steam
overwhelmingly positive.
reviews, overwhelmingly
Yeah, which is
positive.
always a good sign. If I see that,
84
yeah.
Metacritic.
If I see overwhelmingly positive on anything,
Yeah,
that's like, it's got my interest for sure.
yeah. It's really nice, really good. I think it's available on PC. I think it's pretty much on all consoles, including Switch, and it's part of Game Pass as well. So if you've got Game Pass, it's on PC, Xbox, and it has my favorite feature of Xbox games, which is Xbox Play Anywhere, which same with Children of Mortar. So it means that whether you play it on the console or on the PC, you save data transfers across them both, which is great for me, particularly working at home. I don't want to, sometimes after I finish a day at work, I don't want to be sat in front of my PC anymore. So I can go down and play it on the Xbox in front of the telly on the sofa with a beer or something like that. So, but yeah, I can't recommend that game highly enough. It's something that I'm actually itching to go back and play as soon as we finish with this podcast. So.
You've got my attention. I might pick that up. I'm not gonna lie. I'm interested.
Yeah, it is very good. Unless something really terrible happens or the game, becomes really dull, which I can't see it's a game that I'm definitely going to see all the way through and probably dip back to on occasion. It's just a really nice
What's
game.
the
As
soundtrack
soon as the
like? It
game
looks like it'd be
starts
a
and this your soundtrack,
game with a good one, yeah.
yeah, great soundtrack, really chilled. The you when you open up the map in the game, you travel to different areas, and the boat goes in real time. The travel happens in real time, so there's no fast travel. The boat starts traveling. So during that period of time, you use that to kind of grow your crops or do a bit of fishing. The music's really nice. The animations are gorgeous for all the characters. It's just it's I'm proper gushing about the game.
Excellent.
I just think if you like those type of games, chill out, love it, love a good soundtrack, really nice animations and looks, and something that you can dip in and out of and make progress as you go along, I'd recommend that you check it out.
Well, there you go. Yeah, that's
Right,
good.
I'm going to stop talking about Spiritfarer now because all I want to do now is just stop this podcast and go play it. But we will persevere. We will get through the
Or I could
podcast,
just
and
talk to myself
oh boy,
for
we've got a
another
lot of stuff to
40
talk about.
minutes.
Yeah, well, we have got a hell of a lot to talk about because, of course, this week, Sony finally let us know what was going on with their console on the back of through the PlayStation 5 showcase. So the showcase, I want to say, when did the showcase go live? It was on Wednesday evening, wasn't it?
9
Well,
o'clock.
Wednesday evening for us
Yeah.
Brits, 9 o'clock in the evening, British
It's
summertime,
the only time that matters.
and yeah, the zero line across all the world. It's where time starts and
Well, it
ends.
is. It's the Greenwich
So
Mean Time.
it is. It is. So PlayStation 5 then. So we now know that the PS5 launches on November 12th in the US, in Japan, Canada, Mexico, Australia, New Zealand, and South Korea. And it will launch on November 19th for the rest of the world, including the UK. When it comes out, it is going to launch with two different models of it, so two different SKUs. So we've got the PS5, which is going to be £449.99, which matches the Xbox Series X's price. And the digital version, which, as the name suggests, cannot play disc and can only play games digitally, will cost £359.99.
Yep.
So we know that the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, which are the most powerful versions of both those consoles, or arguably the PS5, whether it's digital or not, is the same power. They are going to be launching at the same price. The digital version is cheaper, but then the cheapest out of the lot is the Xbox Series S, which is £250. However, that console is not as powerful as the Xbox Series X. So it's kind of a hop between the Xbox One X and the Xbox Series X. The Xbox Series X we know is going to be launching on November 10th, which is 2 days earlier than the PS5 in the US and 9 days earlier than the PS5 in the UK and Europe. And if you're listening to this on Friday, pre-orders have already gone live. If you haven't checked your pre-orders, chances are you probably missed them because they gave very little notice. But we know that Xbox Series X and the S pre-orders go live in the UK on September 22nd at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, which is a much better way of doing it.
Yeah, to give people notice, which is, funnily enough, what PlayStation said they were going to do until they didn't. So obviously a lot to digest there. What are your thoughts about the PlayStation 5 pricing?
I mean, pricing, I think they were either going to match or beat Xbox, and I think it was sort of well documented that they were having difficulties getting the price down. So I don't think it's as surprising that they weren't able to do that, and that they've ultimately ended up matching Xbox. Which I think it's fine. That was good. Certainly no complaints. Yeah. I think when we were watching the event live and they announced the digital console and the price of the console, initially I was thinking like, that's a really good deal, is that? But then it sort of dawned on me afterwards that as much as I don't have any objections, paying full price for games and buying them digitally, certainly have no aversions to that. It sort of dawned on me that the money that you would save by buying the digital version would be very quickly negated by only ever being able to buy full price games through their store.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think having that option of buying a pre-owned game or borrowing a game from a friend and just being able to put it on your play it on your system for a little while, give them the disc back. I think the more I thought about it, the digital version, unless you are absolutely desperate or convinced that you weren't ever going to have any objections to paying full price and buying it within Sony's games sort of game store on the console, then
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
But
definitely.
I honestly, I'm now in the boat that when I get a PS5, it certainly won't be a digital version.
Yeah, I think the thing to bear in mind with this digital edition of the console is that we know it's backwards compatible with 99% of PS4 games. So you're already going to have a library transferred over. And when it comes to digital game pricing, obviously when the games come out at launch, they are quite expensive. But the deals that come off afterwards, particularly PlayStation 4 this generation, they've been really competitive and people have kind of started to like PlayStation 4's digital sales to Steam's in terms of the
Yeah, true.
value
Yeah,
that you get. So obviously if you get a PS5 digital edition and you're not fussed buying about the games as soon as they come out, it's probably going to be a nice console to have. You're not going to lose that money. But if you're someone who ideally likes your games as soon as they come out and you do want the option to be able to trade them in to subsidize the cost of the console or the games, then obviously you're going to want to get the disc version. But the thing to bear in mind is that I can imagine the digital edition PlayStation will be selling that console at a launch at a loss, because the only thing that's missing between those two consoles, the digital and the digital edition and the standard edition, is the disc drive. And the disc drive is not going to cost £90. It's going to be it's going the PlayStation will have eaten some of that cost, but they'll get that money back because the only way you can buy games is going to be through their storefronts. So there's no more middleman. There's no more Game or GameStop taking a cut of those sales when they take them. All that money is going straight to Sony, so they're going to be able to recuperate their losses over time and basically and come out with a profit. That's where they're going to be hedging their bets with that one, I think.
yeah,
But I'm with you. I do like having a physical library, particularly of games that I'm really fond of. Like I'll if I know I'm going to like a game, or I play a game digitally and think I really like this game, I want to get this game and have it on my bookcase, then I'll go and buy the disc version, and it's nice to be able to go back to those as well. And I think kind of looking at the PlayStation 5, of course it can only play PS4 games, but with the Xbox Series X being able to play backwards compatible games from the 360, the original Xbox, and the Xbox One, that console more so, I'll be getting the Series X over the S because I want to be able to go back and play those games with those enhancements. I mentioned on the last podcast, I bought a disc version of Hunter the Reckoning, which came out on the original Xbox. Just put that in the disc tray and it worked. And they upscaled it to 4K and it looks fantastic now. So having that option is quite nice. I suppose it doesn't hurt them in any way, shape or form by having those different options for people. If we look at the lockdown, I think it was 65% of all games purchased during lockdown were digital.
well, yeah.
And I know the
But obviously
situation.
retailers weren't
That
open, so I think it's you know
some of them, I think you can still buy games from Amazon and things like that, but people's habits changed. I think people were more happy to buy those games,
yeah.
get that
No,
instant
I
access,
get what you're
and the
saying.
sales
Yeah.
as well will. I think Borderlands 3, when that came out as well, Borderlands 3, 75% of the copies of their game that they sold was digital, and that game came out in September last year.
But I think
We are definitely moving to that digital
looking at
preference.
lockdown digital sales is inflated, though. I think you would expect more people, especially. I mean, aside from anything, just the idea of something like a physical item being delivered to your house. Obviously you don't know if it has COVID on it. To sound extreme, do you know what I mean? Whereas if you buy something digitally, it there's no risk there. So I wouldn't
Yeah,
look at the lockdown rise in digital sales as anything as anything being as a surprise. I feel like
I
that's
think
kind of
I
to be
think it's
expected.
kind of just I think it's kind of just sped up the process. I mean, if you look at PC, for example, I remember a time where you'd go into HMV and you'd buy PC games on the shelf next to the PlayStation and the GameCube and things like that. Now there are very few places that you can buy physical copies of PC games, and it's
Yeah.
because Steam and the Steam storefront, is a good place to play games. The sales are really cheap. It's actually much cheaper to buy games digitally than it is to buy a physical copy of a game. And I think that's where PlayStation and Xbox are going to get to, and hopefully we'll see that reflected in the games pricing. Ultimately, if games all become digital, then there is no transport costs, there's no manufacturing costs. So you would hope that cost, that saving, is then given to the consumer to as a result. That is a optimistic view, because my I would have thought that maybe they would just be happy to keep the costs at the same price because people are used to paying those costs because they did already, and they'll just maximize their profits. But we shall
I
see.
don't think
It's going to be way off.
I don't think though the digital sales on PC are really comparable to the digital sales on console. I think there's
Not at the
I,
moment,
I
no.
think Steam was that like 2003, 2002. It's been on the PC platform for a long time, and
Yeah, yeah,
I think
definitely.
generally speaking, digital has, at least for like the last 15-ish years, like I don't really know anybody that thinks like, oh, this game's coming out on PC, I'll go get the digital version, unless it's something special, like I don't know, like a World of Warcraft expansion where there's, lots of goodies and statues and figurines that you can get with it. I think generally speaking, the vast majority of PC games would be sort of thought of as digital products, whereas with consoles, I
Yeah,
think hard copy sales, certainly, pre sort of pandemic, would be kind of the standard, whether they're bought online or in store. And,
mm,
and I would say digital sales, generally speaking, would be less and less. And obviously there's exceptions to that, like so like Borderlands, if that's true, that's obviously an example of perhaps a shift in the trend.
yeah. I think the thing to bear in mind is that PC obviously was disc based in terms of what you would buy, and they have had those 15 years ahead of the consoles base where they had online marketplaces where you could buy those games. Consoles are ultimately catching up in terms of that. We didn't really have proper game fronts until the Xbox 360 arcade was released, really, where you could buy games online, and they were limited to arcadey style games, like mini smaller games from indies and things like that. And really only when the PS4 and the Xbox One launched could you really go out there and buy full versions of first party games, third party games, AAA games digitally. And PC been doing that for years in advance. So we're definitely going to be moving there. And I think with COVID, it probably has just accelerated that. People who might not even bothered with digital games before have now actually tried it and thought, oh, well, that was pretty easy, actually. And I know some people who were massively against subscription services on PlayStation Now until lockdown hit, and they thought, oh, I'll give it a go. And actually, it's only cost this amount, and I can get all these games and play them digitally. So I think that's the way we're going.
Yeah.
And I, like I said, prefer having physical copies. I do support these indie developers that release their games through companies like limited run games or super rare games and things like that, where you can get a physical version. But I definitely think that I'm in the minority and will continue to be in the minority for years to come. Obviously, because we've never had games consoles that released at launch with digital only versions, and that's both Xbox and PS5 who are both doing that as well. So we'll see. So obviously we saw these prices and release dates for the PlayStation were announced at the PS5 event, and they had a sizzle reel as well. They kind of went through all the games, additional games and new games that we were going to be getting on the console. And I think they started very strongly with the Final Fantasy 16 release. Obviously, this was rumored to be part of the PlayStation 5 event, and it turned out those rumors were true. Bit of mixed messaging around if the game's going to be exclusive to PS5. We're not sure if it's coming to PC, if it's going to be a timed exclusive on consoles, and we don't have a release date for it as of yet. So we're going to be waiting for that one for a while, I could imagine.
Yeah, yeah. No, it was a weird. I thought it was a bit of a weird trailer. I couldn't really work it out. It looked
Mm.
sort of yes, it's Final Fantasy 16, but it kind of looks sort of like a MMO. It didn't, if you look at some of the launch trailers or sort of reveals for Final Fantasy games in the past, and they've all had this kind of really sort of epic, grandiose, sort of big budget production, massive graphics and big
Yeah.
worlds, and the production value of, I mean, I would dare say, some of like the Final Fantasy 13 trailer comes to mind. I dare say that to me kind of gave me more of a Final Fantasy feeling than 16 did. It just
Yeah.
didn't really feel like it had any sort of identity to it. It kind of looked, I don't know.
I get 100% what you mean with that. I think with Final Fantasies, right back to Final Fantasy 5 and 6, they've always been known for their like amazing looking cutscenes and how good they looked. Final Fantasy 10 came out on the PS2 and you had that amazing cutscene at the beginning with the Blitzball Arena and things like that. And you're thinking, whoa, this is the proper next gen at the time. And every other game that's done that since, they had the cutscenes from Final Fantasy 13, as you said, which just looked like something that had been taken from a Pixar movie in terms of how good it looked visually. And then you had the same with the cutscenes in Final Fantasy 14, the MMO, and then Final Fantasy 15. And this one, I was watching the cutscenes and on the trailer, I was like, yeah, I mean, it looks okay. Graphically, I'm not blown away. In fact, I'd probably argue that the graphics look better from Final Fantasy 15 than they did on this. But of course, the game's in development. We're probably seeing alpha footage and things like that, so it could very well improve between now and then. But yeah, the combat was a bit confusing. I couldn't tell whether it was real time or whether it was turn based.
I don't
So
really remember any of the characters from the trailer either. And I think that sort of
no,
that goes to what I'm saying in terms of it not really having an identity. When I watched, the best example I can give is the Final Fantasy 13 trailer. Where, when I looked at the when I looked at some of the characters back then, you had the guy with the afro and the chocobo in his hair. You had Lightning, obviously with the pink hair. You had
yeah, yeah,
the various characters that you could sort of identify individually, but I didn't get that impression from
no,
from 16. I don't know, it just felt weird. It
yeah.
felt like, I mean, like I said to you at the time when we were watching it, I honestly thought it was an expansion for Final Fantasy 14. Like
Yeah,
it looked like it.
it was pretty bland. It was just bland. It didn't nothing grabbed you, from the trailer. So we'll see. I mean, obviously it's a new game in the. We now know it's a new game in the series. We also know it's a single player game at the moment. So yeah, we'll see. As a Final Fantasy fan, I wasn't really super excited. Although to be fair, I've not been really super excited about a Final Fantasy game since watching the trailer for Final Fantasy 13. Really, so but yeah, we shall see. No release date on that one. So, and I'm sure we're going to get some updates to the messaging because, again, it was a bit of a mess in terms of whether it is going to be PS5 exclusive, is it going to come to PC, or is it a timed exclusive on consoles? Which wouldn't, I think it's more the latter, simply because it's Square Enix, and Square Enix did exactly the same with Tomb Raider, Rise of the Tomb Raider for Microsoft. We then saw gameplay footage of Spider-Man, Miles Morales. Nothing really to say about this from my end. I don't think, I kind of knew what we were getting. It was nice to see the gameplay and looked a little bit prettier than the Spider-Man PS4. Didn't look massively different though, I didn't think, in terms of graphic fidelity. So we'll see
I'd say with that,
what that looks like
it
when it
was
comes out.
a nighttime sequence, which typically is sort of less sort of impressive, isn't it, in terms of graphical? You're not seeing like the sort of the contrast of lighting and the the sort of the different times of day, and obviously
Yeah, that's
it's going to
right. Yeah.
have New York as well, I'm assuming it's going to have essentially the same world as Spider-Man PS4. The sort of the
Hmm.
whole essentially the whole of New York, or the main sort of island in New York to explore. It'd be cool if you could go across the Brooklyn Bridge and start exploring Brooklyn a bit, but we'll
Yeah,
see.
we'll see. One thing that I noticed it from the trailer was the draw distance. There's that scene where uh, he's flying in the air to the bridge, and you can just see for miles in terms of the level of detail, which I thought was quite good. And the thing that I wanted to see from my biggest visual upgrade is going to be the fact that you can choose to play it in 1080-60, which is the way that I'm going to prefer to play that game over 4K 30. So, but we haven't seen any of that gameplay yet. I'm sure we'll find some out close to the time,
Yeah, I think
and that's out
I
this
think for
year.
all intents and purposes, it is a current gen game with next gen enhancements, isn't it? I mean, I think the fact that it's coming out on the PS4 as well, would sort of suggest that I don't feel like but playing it on PS4 you're going to get any lesser experience. I think the only thing that you're going to see with the PS5 version, is obviously slightly more sort of graphical enhancements. Obviously, like you explained, the various options with resolution or performance, playing it in higher resolution, but a lower frame rate or higher frame rate, lower resolution. But
Yeah, and it's a good point actually. I think it's interesting how this is going to impact their messaging because the big thing they were talking about was the new SSD, the hard drive, and the fact that it eliminates loading from games. How much is that going to actually impact the gameplay experience playing it on PS4? Because if there's very little difference, it just takes a little longer to load. Then does it really warrant getting that excited about the SSD? So we'll see, I suppose, when that comes out. That comes out as a launch title for the PS5
yeah,
this year.
but
And then,
I don't think any games that come out when you look at like the back end of the previous generation and then the early releases of the next generation, there isn't a massive difference. One example I sort of always think back to is the Splinter Cell Chaos Theory on the original Xbox, and I remember thinking at the time when I got a 360. Chaos Theory kind of looks like a 360 game. Like it looks better than some of the 360 games that I'm playing, at launch.
mm,
So, I think with Miles Morales, it obviously is on the next gen, but it's not a fully fledged next gen game. But nor should it be. That it's not been sort of made with necessarily the next gen in mind, has it? And I don't think
yeah.
any console will
Well,
say that.
the reason why I brought that up is because I know it was something that Insomniac themselves were quite keen to point out about the fact that there's going to be, it has a massive impact on the loading of the city and avoiding loading screens and things like that. So, for the developer themselves to make a massive song and dance about the power of the PS5 for this game, the fact they're releasing on PS4, I'm going to be quite keen to see the Digital Foundry comparisons when the game comes out, comparing it and what the benefits are.
Yeah.
If it is just visuals, then is it really going to be a massive difference in experience? Probably not. So,
Oh, I
but
think
we'll see.
I think the loading times will obviously be better on the PS5 version. Like, I mean, if it has an SSD, well, it does have an SSD. Um, you're definitely going to see improvements there. 100%. That's what an
Yeah,
SSD is.
I think that in terms of just loading times, yeah, that Mark Cerny when he was doing the tech conference that lulled everyone to sleep early this year, he mentioned a lot about the fact that in games at the moment there's kind of repetition of code, which makes the game bigger or inflated in size. And with this new super powerful SSD, which is unique to the PlayStation, they can cut all that out. There's going to be smaller game sizes. It's going to be able to render information much quicker. And the fact that the SSD in the PS5 is unique. It's not just like getting an SSD on a PC or installing one onto your PS4 or your Xbox One at the moment. There was a big song and dance about that. So again, I'm quite keen to see what that benefit is going to be beyond just standard loading times or just standard performance. Is it going to change anything else? And I can imagine the cross-platform games are probably not going to showcase it as well. But as we'll go through, there are some games that are coming out in this that were shown off at the PlayStation 5 event, which are going to be purely next gen.
Yeah, but it is always sort of later in the console cycle that you see, that once developers get their mind around the framework of the console and the development kits and how to really sort of get the most out of the system. It's later in the cycle that you start to see the consoles flex their muscles. I think that
Yeah,
I think
no doubt
I,
about that. Look at the PS3. Look at Uncharted 1 to The Last of Us. It's like night and day, isn't it?
yeah. So I think early on you've got to expect that the difference between the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5, or the Xbox One X and the Xbox Series X, there's not going to be a massive difference. There will be a difference, obviously, just by having more sort of graphical power and more sort of upgrades to the hardware, but it's not going to be as big as the games that come out later, later in
Yeah,
the cycle next year, a few years from now.
yeah, I agree definitely. So after Spider-Man, we then saw Hogwarts Legacy, which
Awesome.
we'd seen snippets of it before through leaked footage almost 2 years ago. So it's been quite a while in development. It's an RPG which is set in the Harry Potter universe, but it's set 100 years
200 years.
before the events of the Harry Potter
It's
story.
1800, I think it said on the trail, isn't it?
It says sometimes in the 1800s. So Harry Potter 1990 something, early 2000s. I'm not sure, but basically, yeah, it's set in the 1800s, set before the Harry Potter story, and it's the way it kind of looked in this trailer was that it was you can do these type of things. You create a character. It's an RPG, and I kind of got the inkling that there's some kind of co-op experience from that trailer, though it hasn't been confirmed. But I'm sure we'll find out a lot more before that comes out in 2021.
Yeah, no,
Sounds like you're quite excited
I
for this
am.
one.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love that leaked footage that came out a couple of years ago. I'm not even a big Harry Potter fan. I've seen the first Harry Potter. I think I saw the fourth one, and that's it.
Yeah.
Maybe watched the third one. Like, honestly, I've not watched them all, and I certainly couldn't tell you, more than the names of, I don't know, 3 or 4 characters, in the entire I don't know, sequence of films. But I think anything. I'll tell you what. When I watched the trailer, the proper sort of reveal of the game, it gave me Fable Lost Chapter vibes.
Yeah, I got that.
And
I got that from it.
there's something really sort of magical about those kind of fantasy games, those sort of, I don't know, it's kind of like sort of this sort of old kind of English, sort of village. I can't think of the right way to explain it, but it's the kind of game that I can imagine coming out in like November, a game that you would sort of play it in the fall where, it's cold outside. It's just a nice cozy game to settle down and play for the evening. And, the fact that it's an open world sort of, sort of free roam, sort of exploration, sandbox, Harry Potter, world, like you say, with RPG elements to it. I think not really being a Harry Potter fan, it just gave me really, I don't know, really good vibes. I'm 100% going to play it. I think it
Yeah.
certainly sold me.
Yeah, and I think it's really good that they've actually taken a step away from the Harry Potter stories. Obviously, the games that came out before it were all the licensed games that came out about the Harry Potter films that you typically see typically you saw more in the PS2 era where there'd be a film that came out and there'd be an accompanying game which was always trash. So the fact that they've taken a step back and actually created something in the Harry Potter universe that sets itself apart from the films and all the other books is a really good idea, I think. So no, we'll find out more about that. I'm quite looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to a bit more detail as well. And then following that, we got Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. We've known about this game for a while. We've seen multiplayer gameplay footage of it, but we saw a bit of the campaign. We saw lots of murdering, lots of executions. There was shitty little remote control cars, which I could not stand from the multiplayer. But yeah, that looked really visually impressive. With the Call of Duty campaign, you kind of know what you're getting. I'm quite keen to see what this campaign does differently now that Raven is heavily involved in the creation of the campaign, where typically they've been a support team for the multiplayer maps and creating the maps on the multiplayer. So yeah, really like Raven, really like the look of this. I think it's going to be one of those ones where, pick up, play, enjoy the campaign, and then mess around on the multiplayer later on.
Yeah, I mean, it's smooth as butter. You would expect that. It's a well-oiled machine now, isn't it? The Call of Duty wheels keep churning, and it certainly looks like a sort of another smooth installment. And I think Black Ops have typically always been well-received Call of Duty games. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm not
definitely.
the best informed on Call of Duty, but certainly Black Ops 2, I think certainly my favorite Call of Duty that I've played. Maybe the what was the first? What was it? Is it Call of Duty Modern Warfare, like the very first one? Of like,
Call of Duty 4.
yeah, was it? It was Modern Warfare, wasn't it? Before Modern
Yeah,
Warfare 2, yeah. I mean, I think that and Black Ops 2 are the two I've certainly played the most.
yeah, definitely. I think there've been complaints about the multiplayer ones, or the games since then. Obviously, we saw the modern World War II one, which some people enjoyed, but it didn't come out to great fanfare. We saw the Advanced Warfare one, which was an abomination to most
I'll
people.
say
And then
this:
we
the
saw
best thing about the World War II
Warzone.
game was Kiefer Sutherland being the voice of the sergeant. That was awesome. I
Yeah,
certainly haven't forgotten that. That was amazing.
no, no. And then the most recent one, which came out, Modern Warfare, which seems to be heavily focused around Warzone because that's the free-to-play battle royale. Which, you know what, we've seen plenty of games being released and kind of enter the battle royale scene and die very quickly. So I wasn't surprised that the only company who's really been able to do that is Activision with the Call of Duty brand to actually join in, big money, big budget, and actually compete against the likes of Fortnite, which is just dominating the gaming
Yeah,
sphere.
well, they had a sort of a dive into it, didn't they, with Black Ops 4, and then they had
Mm.
the sort of the associated battle royale mode that was sort of locked within a £60 purchase, which I think it was Blackout, wasn't it? I think that's what it was called. And I think the Blackout Battle Royale was actually really good. I think the problem with it is that it wasn't free to play. And
Yeah, that's it.
you look
Yeah.
at free to play battle royales, and typically the ones that have succeeded are Fortnite, Apex, Apex Legends, and Warzone. Others have come and gone. Spellbreak's a new one. I don't think many people know about that yet. Spellbreak's a new entry which is looking quite good, brings some new things to the battle royale genre. And then PUBG, which obviously wasn't free to play, but it was sort of one of the earlier entries, which I think kind of explains why that sort of did reasonably well.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
but yeah,
So
I certainly think, and with Warzone in particular, I think the intentions, if I'm not mistaken, moving forward is that it's going to continue running side by side with these, sort of AAA Call of Duty releases, but there's going to be associated updates to the Warzone mode. So I think when Cold War launches, there's going to be a sort of an update bringing like the sort of 80s themed cosmetics and weapons and things from the Cold War experience, but into Warzone
yeah,
through their associated battle pass. So I think it's a good
no,
idea.
makes
I think it's
sense.
a good idea. It's sort of you're not locked into buying a Call of Duty game to play it. If you want to play Call of Duty, you can. If you just want to play Warzone, you can. I think they've done it the right way.
Yep, and also just kind of side note, just outside of this, they announced that the Warzone is going to be coming to mobile as well.
They did. Yeah.
So you'll be able to play mobile. Obviously, you can play Call of Duty Mobile, which I actually thought was quite a good experience playing with a gamepad, of course, not using touchscreen or any of that nonsense. But they've announced that Warzone's coming out to phones. So, and I assume it's going to be cross-platform, cross-play, so you'll be able to carry on your progress and play on the phone. So looking at more ways to get that game into more people's hands is only going to be a good thing for Activision.
Yeah. You know.
So following Call of Duty, we then saw Resident Evil 8 Village. So we've seen this game before, but we saw a new trailer and there was some snippets of gameplay in there coming out in 2021. Seems like it's following the visual um, visual style and gameplay of Resident Evil 7. So first person, set in like a wintry village. Not sure if you've got anything to add to that.
I mean, as you as you well know, I'm not really a massive Resident Evil fan, so probably not the best to offer any opinions. But long may it continue. It's it's a successful franchise. People love it. Hopefully, it's a game that satisfies the the more hardcore Resident Evil fans. I know, despite being the best-selling Resident Evil game of all time, not many people love Resident Evil 7, or at least the hardcore Resident Evil fans, I think, generally aren't a fan of it. So hopefully this next installment can bring people back. But
Yeah, that'll be good. We'll see what happens. I know some people are quite excited about that one. We then finally saw some gameplay of Deathloop, which is the game made by Arcane Studios, where you play the same sections of to assassinate someone, and you kind of replay it, go back in time to try and find the best way to do it.
the Dishonored guys, isn't it?
Yeah, the Dishonored guys, the guys who did Wolfenstein, Youngblood, and that's coming out Q2 in 2021. Of course, Prey, yeah, fantastic, underrated game there.
They did Bioshock 2, didn't they, as well?
Arcane Studios.
Were they involved in that?
No, I don't think so. No,
Ignore me. I think I'm just thinking of games similar to Dishonored.
Yeah, it was 2K.
Of course it was. Yeah.
Games. They published it and they actually made it, I think, as well. Obviously, it wasn't made by the same studio who did Bioshock 1 and Infinite.
Yeah, so it's Dishonored 1, Dishonored 2, Prey, Wolfenstein, and now Deathloop is there.
Yeah, Wolfenstein Youngblood. They did the Youngblood one. The other ones were done by Machine Head Games. They did Wolfenstein and Wolfenstein: The New Colossus and those ones. So,
yeah.
But yeah, it looks good. It looks quite interesting. I'm keen to see a bit more on that. We then saw Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition, which is coming out on the PS5 and Xbox Series X, not PC. They were quite clear on that messaging, so it's not coming to PC, which is a bit bizarre, but it's the same game, looks nicer, bells and whistles, but it has a new Virgil mode. So there's a extra campaign mode where you play from the perspective of Virgil, which is quite good. If you play Devil May Cry 5, that's quite an interesting story to see their perspective from. Something that I reckon I'll be picking up at some point. And then following that, we saw Oddworld Soulstorm. So again, this is a game that we know. We've known for a while now, but we got to see some new gameplay. So it's shaping up quite nicely, actually. This, it's a direct sequel to Abe's Exodus, which came out in 1998. So, we're talking about 22 years ago that we got the predecessor to this. And obviously there've been spin-offs. We've seen Munch's Odyssey, we've seen Stranger's Wrath, we've seen the remake New and Tasty, but this is a direct sequel to Abe's Exodus. And it looked quite good. What were your thoughts on this one?
I played Abe's Odyssey when I was 10, I think. I think I got it with the PlayStation. Yeah. I thought at the time it was super cool that you could fart in the game on command, and I think of course, I don't know, never finished the first level. I just farted a load and then played other games. But I don't know. I think I think it's nice that it's still around, and it's obviously got enough fans to sort of warrant a I don't know, a next gen release. I can't see me playing it personally, but we'll see.
Yeah, I've always been a somewhat intrigued by the series, but I never finished any of them. And yeah, it's nice that they've kept that. But one thing I do appreciate when I did see the trailer of the gameplay is how they've kept it in that 2D perspective, or that 2.5D perspective like the initial ones were.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think some games that they know some games can sort of move from like Mario obviously very successfully moved away from the 2D, sort of platformy sort of side-scrolling gameplay to the 3D open world, and there's successful installments in that franchise from both perspectives. But I think something like Oddworld, I don't know. I'm not saying it couldn't be done, but I think it's pretty much established its roots in that sort of 2D perspective, hasn't it? Really.
Yeah, and I think what's nice is the fact that you have got different perspectives, like Munch's Odyssey and Stranger's Wrath, to kind of see more of the world,
Because
Oddworld
there's a
inhabitants, and that type of thing.
360 one. Was there that you could sort of?
I
Am
want
I
to say
imagining things?
Stranger's Wrath, I think, was released on the original Xbox. I think it was Xbox
Yeah,
exclusive,
I remember
and then
something.
it was
Yeah.
re-released on different consoles as it's gone along. So I actually first played it on the Vita, so God knows how many years after its intended launch.
Stranger's Wrath, was
So
it?
Stranger's Wrath, yeah,
Yeah.
that's it, yeah. So, and the Munch's Odyssey, I've still not got around to that one. So,
Yeah. No, I think it's
okay, so
cool, but not
not for you.
not really super excited about that.
No. We then saw Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. I'm not going to lie, I've absolutely no interest or care or even know what this is. I've seen glimmers of Five Nights at Freddy's with scary teddy bears, so I'm not really sold on that one. So I don't think you've got anything to add to that
I've
one.
never played it. I've seen it on
No.
Steam and I know it's popular, but it's just one of those things that it's kind of a name that I've heard a lot, but I've never really played it. I don't really know anything about it. Don't know.
Yeah. I suppose the I'd probably say this is the highlight of the show for me, was Demon Souls Remake. So, this is developed by Blue Point Studios. They've been working on it for a while. And we finally saw some gameplay and what it looks like, and we know it's going to be a PS5 launch title. I think I'm not a massive Souls fan, but I think this is the only game that I saw from the whole of the event that I looked at and thought, this is, a true upgrade to the next gen. There's no way this could be playable on anything but the PS5 going forward. And I was really impressed by how good it looked. The lighting, the shadows, how smooth it was. There was no jaggies anywhere to be seen. Whether I'm going to play it or not is going to be probably a different matter. But I think a very, very good looking game, and probably the best looking game of the show in terms of a visual aspect. And of course, the trailer had to have the "You Died" screen in there somewhere.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen that a
So
lot.
yeah, yeah, if there'd be a hell of a lot in that type of game. So, what did you think of Demon Souls?
Uh, I don't really sound like a gamer on this podcast, but I'm just not really a fan.
Yeah,
Don't get me wrong. I think the the Souls genre, for want of a better way of putting it, I think it obviously has its very loyal fans, and I've never played Dark Souls. I've never played Demon Souls. I think the only time I've really jumped into that kind of world of games was Neo on the PS4, which
yeah,
I
yeah.
think is kind of in that sort of realm of difficulty. But yeah, I don't know. I think these. I can imagine that finishing these types of games has a lot of pleasure. It's sort of the satisfaction. The of actually getting to the end of one of these games and overcoming the difficulty and persevering through the challenges and the adversity of the game. I can certainly see the appeal, but I think watching the trailer, I could admire the how well made the game is. It looks like it's polished, like you say. It's a legitimate next gen installment. The physics of the world and the environments looked amazing, but not for me.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll play Harry Potter quite happily.
Yeah, I kind of mirror. I mirror what you're saying there. It's not, I've never been good at those games. Never really been able to persevere through them because you just get constantly owned on them. But I can't help but admire, the setting, how they feel, and the people that can go on Twitch and play on the Donkey Kong drums and absolutely smash the game while they're using all my fingers and the controller, and I still can't do it. So
Yeah.
kudos to those people, I suppose. And then following on from that, there's two more announcements from the PlayStation event. So Sony announced a selection of PS4 games that you'll be able to download and play on PS5 launch day through the PlayStation Plus collection. So almost like a little bit of a mini subscription, almost like a catalog. You pay for PS Plus, you pay it as a subscription. Here are some games that are going to be available on PS5 launch day that you can play. And there's quite a large selection of first, second, and third party games, including like Uncharted 4, The Last Guardian, God of War, Bloodborne, Fallout 4, Persona 5, and there's quite a lot as well that was shown. So at least if you're a PS Plus subscriber, you're going to get quite a few games to play on launch, even though they are PS4 games, but they are still very good PS4 games that are there. So, and then I suppose the last thing that we saw as the curtains closed on the event was a teaser trailer for 2018's God of War. We saw a sequel for that coming out in 2021. So we're getting that quite sooner than I expected.
Ragnarok.
Which I'm very excited for. Really excited for. I think God of War, and we'll come on to this another time, sure, but it's definitely one of my highlights of this generation. It's just a masterpiece. So getting more of that is only going to be a good thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, depending on what comes out first. I mean, if Harry Potter comes out with a console, might get a PS5 before then. But if not, then God of War. I think I'll certainly pick up the PS5 for that.
Yeah. No good. So overall, then they're kind of the main highlights from the PS5 event. Overall, how do you think the PS5 event was?
Yeah, I think it was good. I would have liked more information about the pre-orders. I think that I think that was a bit of a mess, how that sort of unfolded over the last couple of days. It doesn't really affect me because I didn't really have any intention of pre-ordering it, but I think that would have been it would have been nicer if that could have been handled a little bit better. But no, I mean, I didn't think I would say this, but as I think we've kind of established in the last sort of hour or so talking about this, the highlight for me really was probably the Harry Potter.
Yeah,
I didn't think I'd say that at all. Honestly, going into the PS5 reveal, I did not think I'd be coming out saying, "Yeah, I think Harry Potter. I'm really excited about that." But there we go. I am. So maybe I have to watch all the films
to find out what happens in the future. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it was a solid showing. They did what they needed to come out and announce the price and explain some further things that were coming out. We obviously know some games that are coming out from PS5 because we saw the previous PS5 event, which showed things like Ratchet and Clank and the like. So some of this stuff was stuff that we already kind of knew. But mainly it was just to get that detail about the price and the launch, which you've got. Pre-order was a bit of a mess in terms of, they came out beforehand at the Game Awards and said that they were going to give people plenty of notice, and that plenty of notice transpired to be about 6 hours. And then games are purely going to be new games coming out on the PS5 that are exclusive to Sony games are going to be solely PS5 experiences, but we now know that's not the case with Miles Morales and also Horizon Forbidden West. So that's, it's interesting. It's to kind of hear them going back on some of the stuff that they've been saying. So we'll see, but not some of the messaging wasn't well executed and actually came better from other people, other news pundits and organizations and websites that actually gave you the detail better than Sony did themselves. So
and also, I think a little bit more recently, I think it was kind of alluded to a while back that the PS1, PS2, and PS3 weren't going to be supported platforms, but I don't think they confirmed that previously, but after the reveal and all of the pre-order fiasco, it has been confirmed, which I think is a little bit sketchy. Am I sort of wrong in thinking that? I think that could have been a bit clearer. I mean, really, you shouldn't be buying a next-gen console for previous generation games. Not to say that that's not a selling point, but I think PlayStation could have been clearer about that as well. I mean, I can't recall exactly what they said or didn't say about backwards compatibility, but I was reading an article yesterday. I think that ultimately said it's now been confirmed, but that was after all of the pre-orders, which
Yeah, exactly. Sony didn't provide that information directly, which is a shame. I think it's because they're maybe trying to keep the messaging for that's been a bit all over the place as well. They mentioned that they were aiming to make the console backwards compatible and aiming to get all games on there, and we now know that 99% of PS4 games are going to be playable on the PS5, which isn't, fully backwards compatible like what Xbox Series X is. Although, when it comes to Xbox Series X and their promise about, Xbox One X and that promise of backwards compatibility, that kind of fell short as well, just because we know the Xbox original games, some of them are backwards compatible, not all of them were, and the same with Xbox 360 games as well. So, I think, the more games that we get that can be backwards compatible, it's a nice touch, and particularly those games that you can play backwards compatible with an enhancement of some sort is even more appreciated, because there are games on the Xbox One X that you can play which are backwards compatible, like Red Faction Armageddon, which was given away with Xbox Gold, and that game looks absolutely horrendous because it is 720p, it runs really poorly, it's got jaggies everywhere, whereas some of the games like Oblivion, it's been upscaled to 4K. The jaggers are gone, although Oblivion's got its own problems.
So I think what they've confirmed is for the Xbox, it's all of the games that are already backwards compatible on the One X, isn't it? So like all of the 360 games and the original Xbox games that are already backwards compatible, they are still backwards compatible for the Series X. It's not. I think the misinterpretation might have been that going into this next gen, all games are backwards compatible, and that isn't the
Yeah.
case. It's just what you can already play on the Xbox One X. Is that right?
I think so. It's not, again, that's not really being clear either. So
I think that was because there was a really confusing article on, I think it was IGN, and the only reason I came across it is a journalist for another publication sort of retweeted and put, "I work in the industry, and even I don't know what that headline means." so, so I think it has been a
yeah,
bit confusing, but I think that's my understanding, is that anything that's already backwards compatible, you'll be able to play that on the Series X, which is pretty cool because
yeah,
there's already quite a lot to go there. But again, I wouldn't be buying any of these consoles for games that are backwards compatible. I'd be buying them for the games that are coming out.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
That has to be the primary reason.
yeah. You want a new console to play new games. You don't want to get a new console to play existing experiences, really.
Yeah.
So obviously PlayStation came out with all that news, and Nintendo, seemingly wanting to try and steal a little bit of their limelight, came and just dropped, "Hi guys, we're going to do a Nintendo Direct Mini partner showcase," and they released that yesterday. And obviously not massive in terms of announcement, but there are a few things worth pointing out that Nintendo did announce, and they mentioned that they're doing more of these partner showcases. So it's purely third-party games that are coming onto the console, or second-party games. The biggest announcement from the showcase absolutely was an exclusive game for Monster Hunter game for the Nintendo Switch called Monster Hunter Rise. Comes out March 26th next year, and it looks like a hybrid between the portable versions of the games that we got, such as the 3DS games and the one that was released on the Switch, which was a remake of the 3DS games, and also some of Monster Hunter World, which came on Xbox One and PS4, which didn't make its way to Switch. So it's nice that Switch users who weren't able to experience Monster Hunter World now have their own game coming out, and it is a new game. It's not just a remake of an older version of the game, which looked quite good. We also saw Monster Hunter Stories 2, Wings of Ruin. So this was a sequel to the 3DS game which came out. It was like a story-driven turn-based JRPG. So they're getting a sequel of that, which looks quite pretty, actually. It looks quite nice, and that's out summer next year as well. We also saw Hades. So Hades got dropped, so it's out now on the end of that conference. That's the one that's been made by Supergiant Games. I don't know too much about it, but I know the reception of it is really, really positive, really, really good. And so that's going to be one definitely to check out. Supergiant Games, the guys who made Transistor and Bastion, so they've obviously got a legacy of really successful, really popular, beloved 2D styled games for going before.
Yeah, I don't know about now, but certainly at the time, I think when Bastion was made, they were a really small dev team.
Oh yeah, they were definitely.
I'm not sure if that's changed or Bastion and then Transistor, I think, was their sort of next game, wasn't it?
Yeah,
But yeah, I think they certainly achieved a lot with very little, which is fantastic. And they've always stayed true to that art style as well, haven't they?
absolutely. Yeah, they have done, and that kind of. I don't know much, but again, I don't know much about Hades, but they've always had that kind of narrative lean on their games. Bastion, you had the narrator, which narrated what was going on, and you had
Yeah.
the narrator in Transistor as well. So hopefully that happens as well. That's one of the things that I really enjoy about Children of Mortar, which kind of is clearly taken a leaf from Supergiant's book for their game. So we shall see.
Yeah.
In terms of other announcements, we saw Disgaea 6, which is a long-running NIS America game series, a tactical JRPG. I've got to be honest, I've never been a fan of this. I've tried to get into it, but I suppose the biggest news about this is it's exclusive to Switch, whereas Disgaea, all the other Disgaea games have all been on multiple platforms, and that's coming out 2021. We saw Rune Factory 5, which looks very weebish in terms of, it kind of reminds me of the Atelier series. It's like a cross between a JRPG and Harvest Moon style gameplay. You can have relationships in it as well. They were quite keen to point that out in the trailer as well. That comes out in 2021. Balan Wonderworld, which is being created by, I think, one of the code creators of Sonic, which is a platformer, very cutesy, very, very pretty looking game. That's coming out March 26th next year. We also then got The Long Dark, which is that was released yesterday on Switch, so it came out at the end of this reveal, and that's kind of this survival horror set in the frozen landscape. It came out when it was in early access on PC some years ago, and it was just a survival aspect that came out, but they've now since then added a single player campaign, and very, very nice looking game. The campaign cutscenes are all like hand drawn and painted, which look really nice. The game does run horrendously on Xbox One X, so I'll be keen to see how that holds up on the Switch.
Yeah. I've heard of The Long Dark. I've not played it though.
Yeah, it's quite good. It's not meant to look realistic. It's kind of got like a cartoony feel to it, but it's all about surviving in the cold frozen wilderness. So you've got to buy food, you've got to find food, you've got to make fires. There's wolves that hunt you down, and it's quite a good game. It's very hard though. It's really punishing. It's you're gonna die a few times before you start to click with the mechanics and things like that. So.
I've seen it on Steam.
Yeah, it's very good. It's quite good. We then saw Fitness Boxing 2, the sequel to Fitness Boxing. I know you're excited about that, Dan. That comes out on December 4th. And then we've got Sniper Elite 4. So that one's been out for a while. They've Sniper Elite 3 and 2 were the ones that they were recently released on the console remastered versions. So that's now coming out this year, holiday 2020. And then we saw Empire of Sin, which hasn't got a release date. Kind of looks like a crime sim manager. So you very much like you're managing a syndicate. So you've got to make sure your operations are ticking over. And then the last announcements they made was Ori and the Will of Wisp, surprising nobody. But that's come out and it's released straight away. And I guarantee it comes out with a physical version. The collector's edition looks absolutely gorgeous. I was very excited until I got online and found that it was $150. So I very quickly shut the web page before I actually went and spent money on it. But that's quite an interesting one because that was almost born. The Switch port of that was born on the back of Nintendo and Xbox kind of having a positive, relationship with the cross-platform stuff and the Minecraft update that they worked together with. We saw the original Ori and the Blind Forest came out on Switch, and it was well received on the Switch, so it was inevitable the sequel was going to be coming out at some point. So, and that's out today as well.
Yeah.
So quite a lot forward. Quite a lot of games that were announced across both PS5 and the Switch. And biggest difference, of course, the Switch one was only 15 minutes. It was just announcement. Here's release date. Right, we're done. So we shall see. I suppose the last bit of gaming news that came out is
The gaming news.
a bit of short gaming news, because it was well, it was over as quick as as it started, which is that the release window opened of the RTX 3080, and I think within 2 minutes or so,
Less.
they less than minutes they were available, and then they were all sold out.
Unless you want to go onto eBay and buy one for £60,000.
Oh, just absolute madness in terms of the pricing. There are people who are actually on the Nvidia's website who were waiting for it to change, and it literally went from notify me when available, so that basically notify when it becomes released, to sold out, and no change happened, so they were unable to buy it. So a lot of people were annoyed about that. Obviously, with graphics cards, there's a mixture of people that are going to be buying them to play games on. There's going to be people using them for graphic data for work, and there's also people that are going to be using them for mining Bitcoin as well. So there's quite a lot of different competitors trying to buy that. So we'll inevitably get some more released over the course of the remainder of the year, but a bit disappointing if you were super excited about that they sold out quicker than the PS5 pre-orders did in a matter of seconds. So were you getting geared up to buy one?
No, I mean, I'm looking at the 3070 as a sort of a short-term upgrade for now, and then I'm going to do maybe at some point next year I'll do a full upgrade, go for like the 3090, get an Intel i11, and do a full sort of juicy build then. But I think for now I'll get the 3070. I'll sort of have I mean, obviously that's an upgrade over the 1080 Ti, which I've got at the moment, and then worry about a big upgrade next year. But the 3080 for me, sort of, it's middle of the pack, isn't it? I think the 3090, if you want to do a big juicy upgrade, that's where you want to go with it.
Yeah, no, absolutely,
So
most definitely.
I'll wait for that.
Bro, all right. Well, that's everything. That's everything we've got for this show. Quite a lot of news to get through, obviously, in terms of a lot of announcements. So it's been a bit of a bumper one, but I'm glad if you're out there listening, you've stayed with us right through to the end. In terms of next week, I thought we'd do something a little bit different. Obviously, we'll comment on the news and what we're playing, but I thought next week, as we're getting closer to the end of this generation now, where the PS4 is sailing off into the sunset, and so is the Xbox One. I thought it might be quite nice to actually reflect on what our top 5 games of those console generations were. And we'll start with PS4 next week, if you're up for that, Dan.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Quite on. So next week we will put together our top 5 games of each console generator, the PS4 generation, and then we'll move on to Xbox One. If you'd like to get involved in that, we'd love to hear your thoughts as well on what you think are your favorite games on the PlayStation 4. As I mentioned at the start of the show, you can contact either me or Dan through Twitter. You can contact me at Matroidvania, and you can contact Dan at TatchND, and that's TATCHND. Reach out to us with your thoughts, your comments, and anything that you'd like to add into the show. Until next time, have you got anything you want to add, Dan?
No, I think we've covered it for now, and we'll get back to it next Wednesday. Come back with some more interesting, hopefully, some more information maybe about the next gen and some new games and what we've been playing, like you say.
Yeah, no, it sounds good. Sounds good. All right, then. Well, till next time, everyone. Thanks for listening. See you later.
Later.